Hey everyone, this is Daniel, and in today's video we're going to talk about how SharePoint list permissions apply to Power Apps. And you'll be pleasantly surprised after watching this video because there are certain things that we do in Power Apps to get that user level functions by putting in some formulas. Well, all of that can be avoided by just turning on a toggle switch function in the SharePoint list. So we'll spend the next few minutes looking at the advanced settings of the SharePoint list permissions. I'll show you those important features that you need to be focused on to really improve the permissions of your app. So that's the plan. Stick around. But first, here's my intro video. So let's get started. Now, before we jump into the permissions and advanced permissions and settings, I just want to give a quick overview of what the SharePoint list is all about. And this is a fresh list that I built. It's got some interesting column types, but that's not the focus. But I did go and put in some data. Important thing is I put in data added by 3 different people, and each of them have different permissions. Now, one set of data was added by me. I have a site level permission. Okay, so permissions for me look a little different as compared to the other 2 users who are your regular users, but they have contribute level access, which means they can come to this list, they can add items, edit items, they have that level of access and how things apply to them. The SharePoint list content is pretty simple. It's actually a place where you go ahead and register for events that are coming up. Like some people over here has been, the Rosanna Christian, she goes ahead and puts all her information over here about the monthly birthdays. We've got another user, his name is Elijah. He goes ahead and puts in for those quarterly architecture meetings. And then I go ahead and put in for all these events like Thanksgiving or Ignite and so on and so forth, right? 3 different people. Backend settings have not been altered. This is actually a fresh list. In fact, if you just noticed, all the items are brand new. But just to give you a quick overview, nothing fancy. I've put like the rating column. I've gone and put them choice type columns, date and type, people and group, just to add some flavor over here. So that is our SharePoint list. And now we're going to go ahead and take a look at it from the Power Apps side. So here we are in the Power Apps Canvas Studio. And what I've done is just gone ahead and built a shell app. Basically, it just has a nice UI look to it, but there's no data connection whatsoever. Nothing has been done. Just to show you, even on the app, see in the start screen, I have nothing over there. On start, nothing over there. Same thing on this main screen. In each of the main screens for on visible, nothing over there. This is just a shell app. And I just made it look a little nice for the sake of this demo. But this is where we'll actually see how the magic happens from a SharePoint perspective, right? So that's just from the SharePoint side. Now let's go and make a connection to that SharePoint list, present that data over here in a gallery, and at least we can see how the permissions from SharePoint side affect here. So I'll come in, and this is nothing new. You're all very familiar with it. So I'll just go and make that quick change. I'll come in and I'll add SharePoint, search for my SharePoint list, my SharePoint connector. My site is it's called POC, so I'll go grab that POC, and it is called SharePoint list permissions. Awesome. Went and clicked on the connection, and there you go. My data connection is set up. I'll go ahead and drop that into the screen, just so that I can at least see it. I want to look at that way. Perfect. I'll go ahead and actually just put my little text over here. And let me just quickly make that a little bit presentable. So that is good. That is the title. So I'll keep that. This is going to be the date. I'll go ahead and keep that as well. And I'll put my number value. That's I like the way that I can go ahead and use the SharePoint item ID. Really helps from a management standpoint of ID numbers and whatnot. But the last thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and grab this one, do a Control C, Control V, put it down. Oopsies, pull it down here, not pull it down. Put it down, right? And I'll go ahead and get the SharePoints created by, I'll hit drop, and I'll just get the display name. For now, that should be enough because we'll be able to see, all the information that's coming in. I'll just grab and put that into this one big line. That way we can just see all the data. All right, I'm done messing around with the list. What I'll do is now I'll go ahead and grab this over here and make it a little bit bigger so that we can actually see all this information. Awesome. So we've got the data. This is how it comes in. Everything is good. Nothing fancy. What we've normally done now in the past is if I wanted to go ahead and do a user level permission, this is where we would do it. What we used to do is we would come over here on the items in the formula bar. I would go ahead and apply a filter. And in the filter, I would come in the data source. And then I'll go ahead and do, say, the created by, comma, and just to be on the safe side, I will grab the email, and then here on the right side, I would put in the user.email, okay? And so this was pretty normal, and this is still fine because it works depending on which data source that you're doing. So if it's not SharePoint, we still do this. This is completely fine. And as you can see, immediately user level permissions has been applied because the SharePoint list that we saw had a lot of data. And you also saw those 3 things that were items added by me for that event, which was these conferences. And so that applied over here. This is perfect, right? But what I want to show you is that if SharePoint list is your data source, SharePoint is your data source, then SharePoint has some advanced settings, and you do it over there because of the deep integration SharePoint has with Power Apps. Those permissions that you apply in SharePoint automatically get applied over here in Power Apps. That's what I'm going to show you now. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and now get rid of this little filter function that we added. We'll keep the SharePoint as is out of the box, and just to make sure all the data came in perfect. Cool. So let me just go ahead and now save this. I'll save it. I'll go ahead and publish it. So I did the publishing. And now I'll also go ahead and make sure that the other users see that. So what I'm doing is I'm coming over here. This is Rosanna. Rosanna also sees all the data. So that's what Rosanna is. And if I come into Power Apps, if I go ahead and refresh that, Rosanna is also able to see all the data. And I just went ahead and got this ready, created that shell app, and I gave Rosanna access to it. I also went ahead and gave another user, and that user's name is Elijah. So if I just go ahead and now refresh this app, it was that fresh app which I created, but now if I go ahead and refresh it again, click on allow, the data comes in. So point being is right now as we stand with that fresh app, everybody sees everything, right? That's the key thing. Now let's go and do the magic from the SharePoint side. So the first thing I want to talk about is the user level permission, the items permission. So to do that, we have to first be the site owner, or at least that list owner. So I'm going to come back in as myself, all right? And I'm going to go to my SharePoint list. And in my SharePoint list, on the top right where you have the gear settings icon, if I click on it, if you've got the correct access, then you can go to list settings. You click on list settings, and in list settings, you click on advanced settings. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to play with some advanced settings. So I click on the advanced settings, and the first thing I want you to focus on is this section over here. It should immediately catch your attention. They say, oh, this is the item level permissions. This is what Daniel is talking about. So this is where we are. And as you can see, the out of the box settings is right here. Every user will be able to read all items. Also, every user can create and edit all items. This is the default setting. What we are going to do now is we're going to go and change things up a little bit. I'm going to go and now switch from this top group read access. I'm going to change it to the second radio button. Let's click on that. It says read items that were created by the user. And then here, I'm going to come to the next one, and for the create and edit access, I'm going to select the next one. It says create items and edit items that were created by user. I'm going to select that. So you see how simple that was? We just went to the advanced settings and I just hit 2 little radio buttons. That's it. But I'll come in now and I'll go and click on OK. And let's go and see how this applies to our Power Apps, right? Same list, same connection, but the permissions change was made in the SharePoint list in the advanced settings. Let's see how that goes over and affects the SharePoint list. So I'll come back now directly into my SharePoint list, and I'll show it to you from my perspective, me as the admin, the person who has the site admin level. Does this affect me? Well, let's find out. So I'm going to now, just as a full test, I'm going to open it up directly as I'm using the app, not in the studio, but I'm using the app. And the app opened up and say, hey, Daniel, you are still seeing everything. What's up with that? See, I'm seeing my stuff, the 3 that I created, see Rosanna's, and I see Elijah's. Well, what's up with that? I'll tell you what's up with it. What that means is that person who's got a site owner level permissions, these user or item level permissions do not apply to you because you have such high elevated access. So something to keep in mind for that, all right? Because if you're using a site where everybody is a site owner, but you still want to go and apply that user level permission, then you want to go and use that filter function, all right? So that's a very important point for you to take away here. That's why that item level permission in the advanced settings just didn't apply to you. Well, let's go take a look at those other 2 users. So I'm going to first come over here and switch over to Rosanna, and I'm going to see, like, this is what she saw before. I'm going to do a little bit of scrolling along. And sorry, Yep, click on allow, on scrolling, on refreshing. And first of all, I'm already noticing that the scroll bar length is a little shorter. That's a good sign. But if I scroll down, I'm only seeing Rosanna Christian stuff. That's pretty neat. So that immediately showed me that that item level permission, that setting that we had added in SharePoint, affected over here immediately. And because it is Rosanna is a regular user, contribute level, it's pretty high level permissions too, but it's still applied to her because she's got that item permission over here. Pretty neat. Let's also go ahead and take a look at another user. Another user over here is Elijah. I'm going to go and refresh Elijah's screen now. So sees the app and see Elijah only had those 4 items in the SharePoint list. Only those 4 items show up. So it's pretty neat that first thing we did was that item level permission setting, advanced setting we did in SharePoint, directly went and applied over here. Huge, huge, no formula needed. Remember though, site owners, this doesn't apply to that. But let's continue and let's talk about a few more other things, all right? Next thing I want to talk about is attachments. Now, for you to see the complete effect of how SharePoint list permissions affect over here, I'm going to go ahead and create a form first, show you the form, pull the items, and then we'll go and make that change from the advanced settings. And that's pretty simple. What I have is, again, in my app, I went ahead and created this other screen. Again, it's a shell, so nothing fancy. I'll come in over here to the edit form. I'll make sure it attaches to my SharePoint list. And then by default, it goes and pulls all these, rows that it has. This only actually happens on my SharePoint standpoint. And so I'll come in and I'll just make it a little bit nicer. I'll expand this all. As you can see, we've got our fancy SharePoint list item or field show up. Shows up over here as well. Everything is good. I'll just go ahead and make that as 2 for now, the layout. So at least it's a little bit presentable. And that's it. Everything looks good. We've got our form from the AES screen, add edit screen, and that's our form. Now, as you noticed, a couple of things has happened. In the edit form, the attachments data card shows up. Also, when right here in the fields, I can see the attachment field. Why? Because I'm allowing it from SharePoint standpoint. Just to be sure, I go to my list settings. In my advanced list settings, I go to my advanced settings, and in my advanced settings, if I don't even scroll, right there, it says attachments, specify whether users can attach files to a list. It is enabled by default. Therefore, it showed up in Power Apps, right? Pretty fancy, nothing fancy. I mean, pretty good, nothing fancy. Now, let's go ahead and manipulate the permissions right here at the SharePoint list advanced settings. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and now set that as disabled. And I'll go ahead and click on OK. And we go back to our Power Apps. In my Power Apps, I'll first go to my data source and I'll go ahead and do a refresh. Refresh basically just makes sure that it's refreshing the connection with the data source, which in this case is the SharePoint list. All right, did you notice something? I got this error message. Now, I'll show you one thing. This sometimes, depending on how your tenant is and whatnot, it might take a few extra seconds for this error to come up. I've even actually never immediately noticed it. I went and published the app. I started using it. Some reason attachments, even though it showed up, wouldn't take the attachment and save it. When I opened it back in the Canvas Studio, I started seeing these errors. So just keep that in the back of your mind that sometimes the change that you made in the SharePoint list doesn't always affect, just sometimes, right? 90% of the time, it will show up over here just like it did. Now, what's happening is a huge big difference has happened. And let me show you what that means. I go back and click on my edit forms. I click on these edit fields, and this thing has now become custom. Well, what does that mean? Custom means that it thinks that you've added it because it doesn't automatically provide you with that. It's like, well, Daniel, I'm still not sure what you're talking about. Let me show it to you. I'm going to go ahead and now delete this form altogether. Delete that. I'm going to go to my insert. I'll go ahead and pretend like I'm adding a brand new form altogether. So I've added a brand new form. And now I go to my data source. That's my SharePoint list. Remember, if you add that SharePoint list connection to a form, it automatically went ahead and put out all those fields. So let's see what happens now. I did that, connected. Hey, the SharePoint attachments has disappeared over here. Why did it disappear over here? Because in the list advanced settings, you went ahead and disabled it. Again, the power of SharePoint integration directly with Power Apps is right here in this front right here to show you what all the magic that it does. But there you go. All that I did was I went and just turned off a radio button, almost like a toggle switch on the SharePoint list advanced settings, and it takes effect over here. Now, what I have noticed though is that even though you went ahead and disabled it on the SharePoint list side, in the list settings, when you come to the SharePoint list, and if I click on new, it doesn't take it out from here. Something for you to keep an eye on. But I'll show you a magic of what you can do over here as well. I'll save that for the end. But let's keep continuing, right? So that was the SharePoint list permissions, and it works really well. So I'm back to the SharePoint list on the SharePoint site. And the one thing I notice is right here, that edit in grid view, that's available. And this can sometimes be a problem to you because you want people to do everything on the Power Apps. You don't want them to come over here and do anything. So first thing is you want to make sure that people don't have the functionality to go and do any of these edit things, right? It's there, so if people have access to use it, they will be able to do that. So how do I go ahead and get rid of this? That's a very simple thing. You go again to your lists, the settings, list settings, you go into the advanced settings, and in the advanced settings, as you scroll down a little bit, you keep scrolling, right here it says quick property editing. This one is by default, it's turned on. You want to go and turn it off. And you do that, and I'll go and go down, click on OK, and go back to our SharePoint list, and it immediately takes it off. You don't have to do any refresh or anything immediately over here. Now, this is something that is only a SharePoint-centric piece. It doesn't directly affect, a change in the Power Apps site. However, it is huge for the overall goal of this app because now any changes are done in the Power Apps site. So that's the very important one, is the quick edit settings, and where you go ahead and find that setting in the advanced settings of the SharePoint list. And then finally, I want to talk about is the search functionality. Now, you know that in a SharePoint list, obviously when you come to the SharePoint list, you search on the top. But what if this is that list scenario where you actually don't want people to go ahead and even find your list? And most of the time, people may not even know where the list is. All they know is it's in the SharePoint app. I mean, it's an app, a Power Apps app, and it potentially has a SharePoint list they may not be sure of. But there are some savvy people who may know that, hey, I know this app has got a SharePoint list, and if I have access to add and edit items in the Power Apps, I have contribute level access to the SharePoint list. So technically, I could just come to the SharePoint site or all the SharePoint sites I have access to, go to the main site on the top, and I can do a search, and I can do a search for, something. Like I know that SharePoint list had something to do with birthdays. So if I just type in birthdays, if I click on it, it'll give me some search results, and those search results are, there you go, the birthday Mondays for February, for June, all that. These are the same things I saw in the Power Apps. So now I can come in and I can click on it and I can go and directly go to that SharePoint list. This is basically how people find it. So as you notice, the root cause of why people were able to find it is because of the search functionality. Well, SharePoint list advanced settings has another really nifty little setting that you need to be aware of. So I come now to my settings and I go back to my list settings, and in my list settings, I go into my advanced settings. And as I scroll down right over here, it says search. Search whether this list should be visible in search results. Users who do not have permissions to these searches will not be able to see them no matter what happens. What it's basically saying is that, hey, if your users have access to this list, then this is the place where you can go ahead and toggle it off or click the off button such that they will not see these items appear in the search results. However, if users never had access to this list items to begin with, it would never show up in the search. That's all that little description is saying. So what we do is we come over here now in and click no. I'll go ahead and now click on OK. And then what happens is, depending on your site, depending on when you do this, it can take anywhere from 1 to sometimes 4 hours. Because in the back end, what happens is the search index has to query, and it'll go and query through the list. It does it on a incremental fashion and say, okay, now in this site, I no longer need to query through this list items. I'm not going to do that. And therefore, the search results will not show up anymore. So what will happen then is, after you've done this, after a few hours have passed by, when people go in now to just their everyday site and they do a search for the same things, they will not see the results from that item over here. And therefore, they will not be able to, smart enough figure their way out where the list is. They won't be able to do that. Why? Because you've gone ahead and used that advanced settings and disabled the search indexing functionality, which is very important for this standpoint. And finally, what do I do with this whole out-of-the-box SharePoint form? Because Daniel, for whatever reason, say the user has found out the SharePoint list, and I know that for the edit grid function, we've taken that out, or the bulk edit, but they're still able to come and do this, click on this new item and get this customized form. What do I do with that one? For that, there's this very little trick, and I'll show you a really quick way to go ahead and resolve that. So I'm going to come back in as a person who has full access to the site, and I'm going to go to this integrate. I'm going to go to Power Apps, and I'll go ahead and now click on Customize Form. What it'll do is automatically take me to the Canvas Studio. It's this flavor of Canvas Studio. It's not the full Canvas Studio, but this is where we go and customize the SharePoint list form. And then once it comes in, what we've got to do is pretty much make it blank. I don't want users to do anything in that form. I'll just go ahead and now create a very simple new screen. In that new screen, I'll actually move it to the top. And in the screen itself, I'll just put in some text. I can go and put in a very important big link. I can in fact go ahead and put in, fill the whole thing up, give it a full color, make it something very prominent so that people will actually know what's happening. And I will say that this list can be modified from the Power Apps app only, right? Say something like that, make it a little bit big and nice and prominent so that people will be able to actually see it, nothing fancy over there. And then from the SharePoint integration piece, when you go up over here, you go to the on save. I just basically go ahead and remove all of these things. There's on save, remove that. You can basically, it's just the on save that I want to remove, but just to be on the safe side, you could go ahead and do these other things as well. The key one is the on save. So now I'll go back to SharePoint. I'll say yes, save and publish it. It'll go ahead and now make this form that we've created as the on-site one, as the default form for your list. So watch this now. Now if same scenario, okay, we've gone and done as much work, but somehow somebody was able to find this SharePoint list. And we'll take an example as well. We'll go and now grab this user, right? This user just happens to find that SharePoint list. We'll go ahead and now refresh it. And now when the user tries to go and click on new, this thing happens. It opens up our customized form and it says, this list can only be modified from the Power Apps only. Cancel, we'll cancel it. But if I click on new and I do a save, nothing happens. Like nothing happens. It doesn't even close the form, so people intuitively will just click on cancel. But you've just done a good amount of work to, first of all, use the deep integration in SharePoint using the 2 steps I described before, but you also made it safe. And you did a great job on that. Wasn't that awesome? I mean, it was so simple. All the settings that we did in the advanced settings of SharePoint list, they do apply to Power Apps. And then we also took a few little precautions like the edit grid view. We went and took that out. We also went and disabled the search so that people who are a little savvy, they won't even be able to find your list items. So I'm really hoping that this video helps you kind of tighten your security a little bit as well. And it shows you a couple of things you can do directly in SharePoint to apply that user level or item level permissions directly in your Power Apps. Hopefully this video was helpful. And as always, keep using Power Apps. Thank you so much for watching my YouTube video. Remember, this is all free with fresh content that is updated on a weekly basis. So if you've already subscribed to my channel, thank you and spread the word. If you haven't already, subscribe, click on the bell notification and let the learning begin.